California's median home price is projected to hit $905,000 in 2026. A new record again. Every headline in America is talking about how unaffordable California is, how people are leaving, how the state is broken. But here is what nobody is telling you. There is another state, the one everyone moved to, the one that was supposed to be the answer to California's problems, and it is falling apart faster and quieter than anyone expected. Florida, the Sunshine State, the land of no income tax and endless opportunity. That is the story they sold you. But the data in 2026 tells a very different story. And when you compare these two states side by side, city by city, number by number, the result is going to shock you. Today we are breaking down Florida versus California. One of these states is correcting. The other one is collapsing, and it is not the one you think. Let us get into it. Let us start with California because that is where everyone expects the bad news. And yes, there is bad news. San Jose recorded a 5.5% median home price drop. On a home worth $1.4 million, that is roughly $77,000 gone in 1 year. That is more than most Americans earn annually, just vanishing from a homeowner's net worth. San Diego fell 2.6% year over year. Sacramento is projected to decline over 3%. Stockton has 25% of all listings with price cuts, the highest rate in the state, and the largest projected decline of any California metro at over 4%. Those are real declines, real money lost. But here is the thing nobody is saying out loud. These are corrections from insane pandemic highs, not structural collapse. California's economy is the fifth largest in the world. The state has Silicon Valley, Hollywood, biotech, and San Diego, the largest ports on the West Coast. The luxury market above $2 million is still moving. The Bay Area's top 5% of home sales are actually up nearly 10% year over year. California has problems. Affordability is brutal. Only 18% of Californians can afford the median-priced home. The Central Valley cities like Fresno, Bakersfield, and Modesto are seeing 20 to 25% of listings with price cuts. Homes are sitting longer. Sellers are competing for a shrinking pool of buyers in those inland markets. But here is the key difference. The floor under California's housing market is built on global demand, limited buildable land, and an economy that generates trillions. According to Redfin, homes in California are still selling at 99.7% of list price. 35% of homes sold above asking in February 2026. The median days on market is 50 days, which is longer than pandemic levels but nowhere near distressed territory. The California Association of Realtors projects a 3.6% price increase to $905,000 by year-end. Even in the weakest markets, the corrections are measured in single-digit percentages. Prices went too high during the pandemic. Now they are coming back down. That is a correction. That is healthy. Now let us talk about Florida. Florida was the number one destination for movers in America during the pandemic. People fled New York, California, Illinois, and New Jersey. They sold their homes at peak prices and bought in Tampa, Miami, Jacksonville, and Cape Coral with cash left over. Prices in some Florida metros jumped 50 to 60% in 2 years. It felt unstoppable. But in 2026, 7 of the top 10 coolest housing markets in the entire country are in Florida. Cape Coral posted a negative 7.1% year-over-year price decline. Tampa has had 13 consecutive months of price drops, according to Case-Shiller, the steepest decline of any city in the 20 metro composite. The FHFA House Price Index for Florida fell 2.3% year-over-year, while the national index rose 2.2%. That is a 4.5-point gap between Florida and the rest of the country. And it gets worse when you look at specific segments. Condo markets statewide have 13.2 months of supply. Condo prices are down 6.1% year over year. 92% of major condo markets in Florida are declining. The statewide median sale price is hovering around $405,000 to $412,000 depending on the source, showing flat to negative year-over-year movement. Cotality has identified 5 Florida metros with very high risk of further price decline: Cape Coral, Fort Lauderdale, Lakeland, Palm Bay, and West Palm Beach. And domestic in-migration, the engine that drove the entire boom, has collapsed 93% from its 2022 peak. Let that number sink in, 93%. But the housing prices are only part of the story. The real crisis in Florida, the one that separates it from every other state in America, is insurance. The average Florida homeowner insurance premium is now $7,562 a year, according to 2026 data. That makes Florida the most expensive state for home insurance in the entire country. Since 2019, more than a dozen insurance companies have gone insolvent. Over 20 carriers have pulled out, gone bankrupt, or stopped writing new policies since 2022. Companies like FedNat, Progressive, and Farmers dropped tens of thousands of homeowners, many without warning. Florida homeowners have seen premiums jump an average of 57% since 2015. That is nearly triple the national average increase over the same period. Coastal properties in South Florida can hit $10,000 to $15,000 per year for basic coverage. And here is where it connects to the housing market. Without insurance, a home sale cannot be completed. Buyers need insurance to close a mortgage. When insurance is unaffordable or unavailable in certain zip codes, the home effectively becomes unsellable. That is not a housing correction. That is a structural crisis. Now there is some positive news. Citizens Property Insurance announced an 8.7% average rate decrease for spring 2026. Some private carriers are also filing decreases. The state's tort reforms are starting to show results. But even with those decreases, Florida remains the most expensive state for homeowner insurance by a wide margin. The crisis is stabilizing, but it is far from over. And here is the part that connects insurance to the housing market in a way most people do not understand. When a buyer applies for a mortgage, the lender requires proof of insurance before closing. If the buyer cannot find coverage or the premium makes the monthly payment unaffordable, the sale falls through. In some coastal zip codes, this is happening regularly. Sellers are listing homes that technically have value on paper, but in practice, the insurance cost makes them nearly impossible to sell at the listed price. The buyer looks at the mortgage payment, adds the insurance premium, adds the property tax, adds the flood insurance, and walks away. That is not a soft market. That is a broken transaction chain, and it shows up as rising days on market, price cuts, and delisted properties that reappear months later at lower prices. And then there is the condo crisis. This is the part that most people outside of Florida have no idea about. In June 2021, Champlain Towers South in Surfside collapsed and killed 98 people. The investigation revealed years of deferred maintenance and empty reserve accounts. In response, Florida passed sweeping legislation. Senate Bill 4D in 2022 and subsequent amendments now require every condo building 3 stories or higher to undergo mandatory structural inspections called milestone inspections. Buildings within 3 miles of the coast must be inspected at 25 years. All others at 30 years. On top of that, every qualifying association must now complete a structural integrity reserve study and fully fund reserves for critical structural components. The key change is that associations can no longer vote to waive or skip reserve funding. That practice, which kept monthly dues artificially low for decades, is now illegal for structural items as of January 1, 2026. The grace periods are over, the deadlines have passed, and the financial consequences are hitting owners right now. Special assessments of $50,000 to $200,000 or more per unit are being levied across Florida as associations address decades of deferred maintenance. HOA fees are doubling and tripling as buildings catch up on roofs, load-bearing walls, fire protection systems, and plumbing. Entire buildings in Miami Beach and Fort Lauderdale are seeing mass sell-offs as owners who cannot afford the assessments are forced to dump their units at steep discounts. And lenders are watching too. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have their own condo approval requirements. A building that is delinquent on its reserve study or has a major deferred maintenance issue may not qualify for conventional financing. That limits the buyer pool and pushes prices down further. Add the insurance crisis on top of this and you get a feedback loop. Insurance premiums for condo associations are rising. Boards that did not budget for the increases are passing mid-year special assessments to cover the shortfall. For many owners, monthly housing costs have doubled in less than 24 months. California has condo issues. Every state does. But nothing in America approaches the scale of what is happening in Florida's condo market right now. There is another factor that is repricing Florida permanently, and that is climate risk. FEMA updated its flood maps and put hundreds of thousands more Florida homes in high-risk zones. Flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program was repriced under risk rating 2.0, and some premiums jumped dramatically. Sea level rise projections show parts of Miami-Dade facing serious challenges within decades. Hurricane frequency and intensity have been increasing according to NOAA data. And reinsurance companies, the companies that insure the insurance companies, are pricing Florida as the highest risk state in America. California has wildfire risk, but wildfire zones are limited to specific areas, mostly the wildland-urban interface. You can buy a home in most of California and never worry about fire. In Florida, the climate risk covers the entire coastline, and the coastline is where the majority of the population lives. When global reinsurers raise their prices for Florida, every homeowner in the state feels it through higher premiums. That is a statewide tax on homeownership that does not exist at the same scale anywhere else in America. Now let us talk about what is underneath these two markets, because this is where the real difference shows up. California has economic engines that Florida simply does not have. Silicon Valley alone generates more GDP than most countries. The biotech corridor in San Diego, the entertainment industry in Los Angeles, the ports of Long Beach and Oakland, the agricultural output of the Central Valley. These are not seasonal industries. They are not dependent on retirees showing up or tourists booking hotels. When tech has layoffs, it hurts, but the companies are still headquartered in California. The talent is still there. The venture capital is still flowing. Florida's economy relies heavily on tourism, construction, real estate transactions, and retiree spending. These are all cyclical industries that contract fast when conditions change. When migration slows, construction slows. When insurance costs spike, real estate transactions freeze. When the stock market dips, retirees pull back on spending. Florida has no state income tax, which sounds great until you realize that the state compensates through higher property taxes, sales taxes, and fees. And those property taxes are rising. People who moved to Florida to save money are now discovering that when you add insurance premiums, HOA fees, property taxes, flood insurance, and special assessments, the savings they expected are not there. In some cases, the total cost of home ownership in Florida now exceeds what they were paying in the states they left. The no-income tax pitch was the bait. The carrying costs are the hook. The migration story has flipped. During the pandemic, people could not move to Florida fast enough. Remote workers sold their apartments in Manhattan, their condos in San Francisco, their townhouses in Chicago, and bought waterfront homes in Tampa and beachside condos in Fort Lauderdale. Florida gained over 300,000 net new residents per year at the peak. It was the largest internal migration in modern American history. Now that flood has slowed to a trickle, a 93% collapse from peak migration levels. Some of those early movers are heading back to their home states or moving to cheaper alternatives like Tennessee, North Carolina, and Texas. California's outflow has slowed too as remote work settled and prices corrected slightly. The great Florida migration boom is over, but the housing supply it created is still here. Builders who started projects in 2022 and 2023 are delivering units into a market with weakening demand. Developers in South Florida are sitting on unsold luxury condos. Inventory in major Florida metros has surged 30 to 40% year over year, and months of supply have crossed into buyer's market territory. In many markets, supply has exceeded 6 months, which is the threshold where prices historically start declining more aggressively. And the new construction pipeline is making it worse. Builders cannot just stop projects midway. The homes and condos that broke ground in 2022 and 2023 are hitting the market now, adding supply into a market that already has too much of it. Meanwhile, California's inventory is rising too, but at a much slower pace. Total active listings in California were down 3.5% year over year in February 2026. The average months of supply sits at about 4 months. That is a balanced market, not a distressed one. The difference in inventory dynamics between these two states tells you everything about where each market is heading, and the smart money sees it. Institutional investors that loaded up on Florida single-family rentals during the pandemic are now pulling back. Wall Street firms are net sellers in some Florida markets. Foreign investors from Canada and Europe are retreating from vacation properties as the dollar strengthens and carrying costs eat into returns. In California, institutional buying slowed but has not reversed. Private equity still views California coastal property as a long-term hold because the supply constraints are permanent. You cannot build more beachfront in Malibu. You cannot create new land in San Francisco. That scarcity is baked in forever. When the big money leaves a market, that is a leading indicator. When the big money stays in a different market despite short-term price declines, that tells you where the floor is. Retail buyers should pay attention to both signals. So here is the verdict. California is expensive. It has always been expensive. It probably always will be. But California's housing market is correcting from unsustainable pandemic highs with strong fundamentals underneath. Jobs, demand, limited land, and global desirability create a floor that prevents collapse. The price declines in cities like San Jose, San Diego, and Sacramento are bringing the market closer to reality. That is not a crisis. That is the market working. Florida is facing something different. Insurance premiums that make home ownership unaffordable. Condo legislation that is forcing mass sell-offs and six-figure special assessments. A migration boom that has evaporated. Rising inventory with no demand to absorb it. An economy built on cyclical industries with no safety net underneath. And all of this is happening before hurricane season even starts. One bad hurricane season could accelerate the decline dramatically. California's problem is affordability. You cannot afford to buy, but the home you own holds its value. Florida's problem is viability. You might be able to afford the purchase price, but the true cost of owning, insuring, maintaining, and protecting that property is spiraling beyond what the market can sustain. The state everyone moved to might be the one. That corrects the hardest. And right now, in 2026, the data says it already is. If you are thinking about buying in Florida, this might be your window, but only if you do the math on total cost of ownership, not just the purchase price. Check the insurance. Check the HOA. Check the reserve study. Check the flood zone. If you are thinking about buying in California, the corrections in cities like Sacramento, Stockton, and the Inland Empire are creating entry points that did not exist 2 years ago. And if you are sitting in a Florida condo watching your HOA fees double and a special assessment letter arrive in the mail, you already know everything I just said is true. Drop a comment and tell me which state you think is in worse shape. If you found this video valuable, subscribe. We cover real estate data every single day. No hype, no fluff, just numbers. We will see you in the next